Good evening, everyone, and welcome, fellow Rotarian. So tonight we would like to welcome Christopher Williams, our guest speaker. So basically, John Bush, the president of the Rotary Club of Star-Upon-Sunset, reached out to me a couple of months ago and mentioned that one of their members has developed a presentation on how we can better face times of change and crisis through a concept called compelling change. So I was like, wow, so we are in the middle of it, so it's really perfect timing. So as far as I understood, this presentation is about 20 minutes long and is in the format of a TED Talk. So a little bit more about Christopher Williams' talk and who he is. So captivating, transformative, raw and deeply moving. These are, as far as I understood, only a few of the words people use to describe Christopher Williams' talks. So with this powerful set of lessons, so we are going to be invited to understand disabilities and crisis through his family chaotic experience after his sister was born, one of the youngest premature babies in the world. So Christopher Williams is the CEO of Expressively Creative Service. And as an accomplished and visionary leader, Christopher was a finalist for Best CEO in Tampa Bay with Creative Loafing magazine in 2019. Through strategic planning, operational excellence, dynamic leadership, he has helped grow businesses and nonprofit across the globe, including in the Middle East and West Africa with the United Nations. So without further ado, I would like to invite you to welcome Christopher Williams. So Christopher, it's all yours now.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you all for having me here. Let me get my share going on. As we do this, I usually don't do it by Zoom. I'm not able to see your faces right now. Usually I read the room as I go along and I circulate a lot. But so if you have any, I don't know, if anything's weird, stop me and let me know. But I'm just going to go through it like I normally go through it. And there will be some interactive parts. Nothing too crazy, but we'll kind of go through that. So today we're going to talk about how we can better face times of change and crisis. But so really first, who am I, right? So like Malona said, my name's Christopher Williams. Really, I help business and civic leaders deal with complex problems, operationalize new ideas, and magnify stakeholder stories. So like was mentioned, in 2019, I was a finalist for Best CEO in Tampa Bay with Creative Loafing magazine. But I tell people, really, I'm just an entrepreneur. I'm a proud lifelong Floridian, and I'm raising a family right nearby to many of you here in Dunedin. So I know the area very well. But so to start, I'm going to ask you to imagine where you grew up, right? There's the city or town you came from, and you probably have vivid memories of the home you lived in with your family. So what about the neighborhood streets you played on? Or what about your childhood friends? So I'd like to take just a moment and picture it with me for a moment. So before we go on, I'm kind of curious. It's going to be hard for me to see, but maybe you can either shout out an answer or raise your hands. I'm curious. How many of you have lived where you currently live for at least a year?
Yeah.
Show of hands. How about 5 or 10 years? What about 10, 20 or more years? So here in Florida, usually I ask, if there's any natives in the room. It happens occasionally, but we have a lot of transplants, so occasionally we have a native as well. But so how much has changed in your hometown and in your life since you were a kid? If it's anything like Tampa Bay here where I grew up, there really have been immense changes. So US 19, the street that I grew up on, it went from a 2-lane road to this incredible high-flying highway. The Devil Rays for baseball became the Rays, and I think most of us know they finally became a hometown favorite. But really, for Tampa Bay, like many places, we've been put on the map nationally, and people really have been rushing to move here, especially since 2020. So our city has grown and it's changed. I think I can say we've been through a lot together, whether that's real estate crashes or hurricanes, but much more. But so change and crisis, right? It's all around us. So how do we deal with it in our businesses, our personal lives, in our cities? Well, what if I told you that the way we're dealing with it now is unraveling the social fabric around us? So according to research, for example, nearly 80% of people say that we have far too little trust in each other today, with a huge 20-year decline. 3 out of 4 people can't sleep at night because they're worried about their bills. And most Americans report that our society is in crisis. And I think most tellingly, the majority of young adults report that they feel desperately lonely, with a drastic drop in friendship across every age bracket. So we do have a problem. At the same time, according to Google's data, talk about leadership is at an all-time record high. So never before in human history have so many people thought of themselves as leaders, yet those facts, they do tell a far different story. So really, what's going on here? And I think more importantly, how can we fix it? So before we can answer those questions, let's take a small detour. I'm going to ask you to join me in an exercise. Now, since we're on Zoom, you definitely don't have to worry, but all we're going to do is close our eyes. So eyes closed, and I'll join you. What if you woke up one day and it was all gone, right? The hometown you remembered, the streets you played on, your friends, your family. Everything you've known is gone because you've lost your sight. You're blind. Now to get around, you can't just jump in your car. You can't simply browse the internet. How will you grocery shop? How will you do your laundry? So take this change in, imagine what it would feel like. All right, you can open your eyes. So this is change, right? How would you describe it? If we can, call out some answers. I'd really like to hear from you.
Totally chaotic.
Chaotic? What else?
I would say a new way of living that
Okay.
we need, a new way of living.
Okay, new way of living.
I've been through a lot of changes before, some relatively major, so I've learned to realize that sometimes you need to adapt.
So you would need to meet that change and adapt to it.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'd say one thing to overcome is loss of hope.
Possible loss of hope, right? And really we rely on hope so much in our daily lives. But so most people who go through this exercise, they report feelings of sadness or fear. They say this wouldn't just be a big change in their lives, it would be a crisis or possibly even a tragedy. So what if I told you that this was the only life you've ever known? Every day you've woken up to darkness. Well, for my sister, Jenny, who's been blind since birth and who is one of the youngest premature babies ever born in the world, this is everyday life. So today, we're going to learn how we can better face times of change and crisis. And we're going to learn this through my family's chaotic experience and through the eyes of a blind little girl, my sister, who the doctors said would at best live her life in a vegetative state. But so to get there, we need to rewind the clock back to 1961. So JFK is giving the first live presidential news conference on TV. A chimp named Ham is about to be sent into space, and that was launched right here from sunny Florida. Construction would begin on the Berlin Wall, and America would put its first boots on the ground in Vietnam. So all this is to say that this was a year of big changes in American history. On a personal level, it's also when my family's story would be changed for generations. So it's when my grandmother was given a medication called DES. Now, DES was controversial from the start in the 1940s, yet it was prescribed for decades for a variety of reasons, many reasons, to support pregnancy, to treat insomnia. Well, as you can see, many, many, many other reasons. This is not even all of them. So although there was no evidence it helped with any of these, my grandmother took it in anticipation of my mother being born. So why does this matter? This very small decision would set off a chain of events leading to decades of crisis for my family. So let's keep that small story in mind, but let's fast forward just a bit. Now it's 1983. If you can believe it, it's when the public internet first went live. And when the first cell phone call was made. For those of us in Florida and Tampa Bay, construction was about to begin on the new Sunshine Skyway after the original bridge was tragically destroyed. Even if you're not in the immediate area, I definitely recommend looking up that story when we're done here today. It is a tragic, harrowing story of the Sunshine Skyway, one of our most iconic bridges. But so again, lots more changes. So this is the year that's also my first memory. So picture it with me. You're a 2-year-old child in a hospital. Around you is chaos. There's talking, shouting, people frantically rushing around. There's that smell of disinfectant. And your parents are nowhere to be found. So you and your 9-month-old brother, Dan, yes, that's me pictured there, and that's Dan. You've been left in the care of a kindly young nurse whose job it will be to watch you through the night. So can you kind of see it with me? So it might seem like a tiny detail, but the nurse would show me how to type my name on this big machine that punched out old style key cards for the hospital. I don't know if any of you might be familiar with those. It was the first time that I would recognize how to read, but also recognize how other people deal with crisis. So what was happening here? And most importantly, where were my parents? So down the hall, they were in a dingy hospital room surrounded by doctors. And as I learned I needed to capitalize the first letter in my name, my newly born baby brother, Timmy, was dying. So later, my parents, they would keep repeating what the nurse kept telling us that night. That's everything was totally fine. So that was the story. So although my baby brother was dying and we were surrounded by this, turmoil and confusion and change and fear, I was told everything was normal. That's life, right? So this is the child my parents would lose. And as you can imagine, the individual human impact of that change, it was enormous. For me, it would begin this lifelong obsession with how we think about change and crisis and how we choose to face it or, courageously, or more often the case, pay lip service to it and ignore it. And really, there is a lot involved in how we as human beings experience change and crisis. Recent science has shown that when we just hear stories, experiences of compelling or personal tragedy, like the ones I'm telling you right now, our brains release oxytocin, which increases trust, social bonding, and empathy. Along with a whole host of other facts, I think a little bit more interestingly for me, when we hear these stories, our brain waves physically sync from across the room, or in this case, across the world. So think about that. As you've been listening to me tell you these stories, you and I are sharing this physical connection as our brain waves are syncing up. So that's weird, right? But it's an incredibly powerful connection. So back to my brother Timmy's death. This was the first inkling for us that something was wrong with my grandmother's decision. In reality, Des, that medication she took, wasn't just useless. It could have a far more devastating impact on the people who took it, and an impact on their children, and their children's children, and their children's children. In fact, we don't know how many generations that medication Des will affect in the end, even though it's already had a huge impact. So bear with me for one more time jump. This time we're going to 1985. It's the start of Ronald Reagan's second term. It's a time of the Cold War and Wall Street excess. For those of you in greater Tampa Bay, construction was about to begin on the Trop to lure the Chicago White Sox to Florida, if you can believe that. Now, I can't actually remember the day in 85 that my sister was born, or what I was told was happening at the time. I'm told this maybe because of the trauma of my baby brother's death all those years earlier, but honestly, I don't know. At the time, though, my mother was only 23 weeks pregnant. So I want you to imagine that. For this next birth, my mother was only 23 weeks pregnant. So she was only halfway through. At this point, a woman might have a small bump, but suddenly my mother was being rushed to the hospital. Now, for perspective, I'm sure most of you know, a normal pregnancy is 40 weeks. But every week of those 40 is critical to the baby's development so that it can survive outside the womb. Now, it's hard to capture really what this means for the human body, but I do have a photo. It is a little shocking, but it might help. So this picture shows my sister just after she was born at 23 weeks. She weighs 14 ounces and is the size of a pencil. Even today, she remains one of the youngest premature babies born in the entire world. For a little more context, here is one of my daughters born at 9 pounds. So 9 pounds versus 14 ounces. We're really talking about an immensely drastic difference here. If you're comparing photos here, that one baby, that's a 5-year-old next to that one big baby. And the tiny baby, that's my father's hand next to her, next to my sister. So even today, with modern science and medicine, my sister's survival would be considered miraculous. In the 80s, they didn't even bother keeping data on births like these because the children died. So we really are talking about the most cutting edge medicine and something that was thought to be impossible. So today, only 1% of births are considered extremely premature before 28 weeks. At this point, critical organs like the lungs, the heart, and yes, the brain, they might not have developed to the point where they can keep the baby alive. So half these babies, even today with all our medical advances, they will die. In fact, the threshold of viability, this is just a fancy term doctors use to describe when a baby is too premature to save, is 23 to 24 weeks, even today. And my sister was 23 weeks in the 1980s. So in today's dollars, I think I get this question a lot, and my parents did not have medical insurance. In today's dollars, my parents' bill for my sister's birth came in to over $3 million, just shy of $4 million. So what was the story behind my sister's birth? By this time, it had been shown that that medication my grandmother took decades earlier, caused catastrophic problems during pregnancy for the daughters of women who took it. For my sister, the doctor said she would die shortly after birth, or at best, she'd live her life in a vegetative state. They said there was no chance she would speak, she would never hear, she would never have a life. So I want you to imagine it, right? My parents are in their early 20s. They've had 4 children so far. One has traumatically died, and one has just been born, one of the youngest premature babies in the world. No one outside my family believed my sister would or even could live. And truthfully, we didn't even know if there could be a story other than this one. And if you're looking there at that photo, that's my dad looking like the biggest stoner in the entire world. Yeah, because he was, you know. But so that's 3 stories, right? First my grandmother's, then my brother Timmy's, and now my sister Jenny. And 3 dramatic changes. So truthfully, my life as a little boy and later as a teenager, it had become this nonstop roller coaster of crisis and poverty. And what about my family there? Well, so there's, you know, alcoholism, drug dealing, burglary, violence, self-harm, abuse. And that's really to say nothing about how strained our relationships are, even though we're all right here in the Tampa Bay area. For me, change really resulted in perfectionism, high drive, an obsessive need to figure things out. I tell people I truly struggle to ever shut off. I often only sleep about 4 or 5 hours a night. And that's pretty regular for me. I can be blunt, I can be cynical, and I can be very impatient. You could probably guess my beautiful wife there says, I'm always sunshine and rainbows. Now listen, that's not to say it's all been bad or that I want sympathy. I think, I'm sure you would all agree, we have all faced our fair share of crisis and adversity. But so over my 20-year career in business, I've been continually driven to ask one big question. How can we do it better? How can we strengthen our connections in crisis rather than weaken them? So first, it's not change that's actually the problem, right? We said earlier, we know things are going to change every day. No, it's what change represents to us that's actually important. So for my parents, change represented sacrificing the perfect family they had envisioned. It meant giving up stability and safety. Honestly, it meant, change meant total financial catastrophe. For my siblings and I, change often meant abuse and going hungry, or feeling scared and isolated. We said earlier, right? Losing hope, right? That's what change kind of represented. But so what about change right in our cities and in our states and our areas? For Tampa Bay, change has represented many competing forces. And I think this is true across the country and across the world. For example, change can represent a desire for economic opportunity, but at the risk of community stress as the population continues to grow. Or really, as often is the case, change can be about whether we simply preserve old neighborhoods or we knock them down and give way to gentrification. You really can take your pick. But so I've found that businesses and nonprofits and even cities, they have the same challenge. They're part of change or crisis, but they often take it for granted or ignore what it really means for us as human beings, like what it really, really means for us. So all this being said, though, what can we learn from my family's story? And how can we better face times of change and crisis to strengthen our social fabric? I'd like to share with you 3 strategies, what I call compelling change, that I've learned out throughout my career. So let's talk about that. First, we've identified perspectives, meaning change means different things to different people. That doesn't mean that everybody has the best solution to the problem, but you can't ignore it or explain it away. Being truly open about it, tactfully, goes further with how people choose to trust you to navigate change with them than anything else. And you really can't fake it. So we saw with my brother Timmy's death, it's really easy to pretend that change isn't scary for some people when it absolutely is. Second, partnerships. So without an existing foundation, change and crisis are corrosive. What we need are traditions of bringing people together, sharing values, and a long-term vision. And I'm sure with Rotary, you know, I don't need to belabor this point too much, right? I think though we saw with COVID that partnerships can't be spun up in a moment. They have to be authentic and they have to have a history of solving problems together. We kind of said with my family, right? Well, honestly, there was never anything other than, you know, fighting and chaos. And so there was really little foundation and so little partnership. Third and lastly, priorities. So I can't tell you how many organizations I've worked with have zero plan for unexpected change or crisis. Nothing. At best, they might have a PR agency or they might have a document shoved in a drawer somewhere. So when it happens, senior leadership often comes off as tone deaf or full of platitudes, especially to their staff. Instead, we want to stress test our leaders. We want to get them comfortable with change, and we want to get them transparently talking about how dynamic change can be. We saw with my sister's birth, well, so we'll see how that kind of turned out in a moment, but perspectives, partnerships, priorities. We want to recognize them, we want to fall back on them, and we want to leverage them. So today I'm using each of these points to help my daughters understand my sister's story and really how their childhood's drastically different from mine. But more importantly, the risks that they face from that medication deaths. But so what happened in the end, right? Where's my family now? Did my sister make it, or did she live her life in a vegetative state? Well, so Jenny didn't just live, she thrived, and the doctors were wrong. So yes, she's blind, she has a learning disability, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, but she has taught my family more lessons than anyone else about dealing with change and crisis. And today, I'd like to let her speak for herself. Let me switch over to this video real quick. Let me know if this is hard to hear, but it should be good.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I'm one of the youngest premature babies that has ever been born. This was almost 40 years ago.
So is it sharing that? Can you all hear me?
We can hear the voice.
Okay.
Is there
A little hard
any
to
video? Yeah, is there any video that we are supposed to see?
Yeah, I think it's, let me switch over, make sure
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's not fully sharing.
Correct.
That's what it
It's
looked like.
not fully sharing,
Let
correct.
me make sure we have that.
Thank you.
Let's try it here and see how it works.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I'm one of the youngest premature babies that has ever been born. This was almost 40 years ago. The doctors told my mom that I had zero chance of survival, yet here I am. I'm a deeply religious person, and some of my other interests are doing research online, attending musical concerts, especially classical music, and as you can see, I'm a huge Tampa Bay Lightning fan. Go Bolts! I'd like to do my family's story.
For those of you, let me make sure this is, yep. For those of you who might have had a hard time hearing her, Jenny is difficult to understand because of what they did to save her in the 1980s. Her voice is very raspy. But she basically outlined, you know, she's a huge Tampa Bay Lightning fan. Very passionate about it, very passionate about Tampa Bay. So Jenny really, she's had jobs. She watches sports just like you, just like many people. She goes to concerts. She grocery shops. Throughout her life, nearly everyone told us she would never do any of these things. We were told my family would only live in crisis. So really, you know, I stand here before you today to say that this is the power of compelling change. And really, over the next few weeks, I'd like to ask you to do something very simple for me. and that's to pay attention to change and what it means for the people around you. So with that, that's the presentation. There's always questions. I'm happy to answer them. So I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Christopher. It's a great presentation and very inspiring.
Thank you.
And yeah, very inspiring. So I do have a question for you. As a CEO of your company, how do you incorporate the lessons from your personal experience into your leadership and strategic planning?
So that's a great question. I've usually found myself in roles that deal with a lot of stress, sometimes a lot of money and a lot of publicity. And I have found that while other people tend to panic, especially in larger groups during those situations, I don't, because nothing can be as bad as some of the things I experienced in my childhood. So usually I'm the guy when everyone else is freaking out going, no, we're good. How are we going to break this down into pieces, and how are we going to adapt to it, and how are we going to meet it? So usually that is, let's make a checklist. Let's start taking these bite-sized chunks, and let's recognize the emotion, our emotions, but let's stay calm, and let's dig down and find out, what can we do about this really? I will say though, having been a community leader, having worked both with cities, governments, the United Nations, I do find that other leaders do struggle with this a lot, in that they know the right things to say, but then modeling those things or doing those things, and that's where a lot of times the staff looks at them and goes, yeah, you're saying the right stuff, but you don't do any of that. And so it comes off all wrong, right? Where in reality, we have to live it. And I think that my sister has taught me more about that than anything else, that you just have to live. I don't talk about leadership, is what I tell people. You are just a leader. That's it, right? You just live it. There's no reason to really spend too much time talking about it.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. The perfect example of the servant leadership. That's great.
Exactly. That resonates with me more than anything else.
That's right. Wow, excellent.
Any other questions?
Chris, I've got a couple of quick questions. One, do you ever talk about crisis planning skills that you may exercise or develop to help deal with things in the future crises? I mean, I was 2 years in the Vietnam War. I was in the Navy. My wife died about 6 years ago from ALS. I'm going through things with Alicia's family up in Ohio. So I know about crisis, and I've taught disaster preparedness at both the Red Cross, the military, and now the Rotary level. And it's amazing to me the number of people, and I think the last piece of information for Tampa Bay was 60% of the people in Tampa Bay aren't ready for anything, aren't ready for any kind of crisis, least of all tornadoes and hurricanes. So do you teach, do you talk about any skills
So I do small trainings and workshops to help teach this, often to business leaders. You mentioned the hurricanes, and I have to share, a couple of years ago, I remember going to Home Depot because I needed to pick up a couple concrete screws during one of the hurricanes. And it was the biggest madhouse. And people carrying out stuff. And I'll never forget a guy carrying out like soft insulation batting. Like he was going to like put it on his windows. And for those of us in Florida, right? Like, it's like, what are you going to do with that? Just crazy, like craziness where it's most people. Whereas once you've lived here a long time, I don't know if this is true, but I'd like to think it just becomes part of your routine that you have your stuff and you check it when season's coming around. But yes, I do teach this stuff a lot. I tell people, I think that the biggest factors, or two of the biggest factors, is that we often ignore the emotional side, especially business leaders, that just sit your staff down and go, how are you feeling and why are you feeling that way? And what can we do about it, if anything? And they're very reluctant to do that because it feels like weakness and vulnerability, and it is, but that's okay. The other thing is resilience. And for me personally, I honestly try to get around guys like you so I can learn more, right, from the older generation, because you've experienced some real crisis, right? And there's so much lessons there that can be imparted and learned, that for me, that's important. I've been for Rotary, I think all of you know, they're starting the disaster relief here team. They are coming to talk to us at Tarpon on the 18th. I'm going to hook up with them because I would like to do more of that so that I have that practical, logistical experience. You're out there, you're seeing it, you know what it's really like. And I think that I would tell every leader, like, maybe not that, but try to find those things so you're in it and you can really see how other people react. Other questions?
Chris, I'd just like to say that you have two resources in this club who have personally been through a lot of disasters. Vince Cotero over here was in city management in Cape Coral when hurricane came through and did a number. In fact, his presentation last month was on that subject. And again, I was in our district as disaster chair and governor. So if there's anything we can do to help you in that area,
well, let's pair up after. I definitely. So we just drove through Sanibel probably 6 months ago. So Sanibel's right outside Cape Coral, and it still looked like a disaster zone. We were going to go down. I don't know if we'll make it next month, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's still like in quite a disarray, and they're still rebuilding. So yeah, the hurricanes, I think for Florida it is when does hurricane season start? Yesterday?
Yeah. Well, the first.
Yeah,
but the Hurricanes don't know that.
Yeah, I was gonna say no one else knows that yet, but
yeah,
that's right. Excellent. Wow,
Great.
so
great
great.
job.
Very inspiring and a good example of resiliency. So thanks for sharing. All right, so if there is no more question for Chris, so Chris, I would like to thank you for your time, and so we stay in touch. We would like to stay connected with your work, and basically, if in any way we can support your initiative, you just reach out to us and we'll figure out.
sounds good. I appreciate you all hosting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye. All right. So, what do we have next? I think what we have for today. So we wanted to give I wanted to give the opportunity to PDG Prince to share a couple of things about the district grant, which has been approved. Vince, would you like to share where we are with the district grant?
Yeah, sure. As you've got on the agenda and then coming up on the board agenda, the actual amount, I guess a week or so ago, we were notified, and what's today, the 4th? Yeah, we have 6 more days to notify them, and I figured we'd make a decision tonight on whether to accept. And if we don't let them know by the 10th, it's automatically accepted. The bottom line is the committee must have had a very difficult task, and I really commend them because they had 20 applications, and their decision was to fund all of them. Now, that's, I'm sure if people went through all 20 applications, they probably had a lot of comments in the room, but they deemed that all of them were worthy, and I respect what they did, and everybody got a lower amount than they asked for. Our 50% district designated fund, or DDF, allotment that we asked for was $2,725. and we were awarded just under $1,300. So if you do the math, it's a little over $1,400 that we would have to find on our own, either through additional fundraising, whatever we decide to do if we accept. My recommendation to President Maloney was that we accept. I think they were really high on the project, especially based on the conversations we had with Vernon, who helped us at the very end of the application process, and conversations we had with Lace Blue McLean, who's the district grant coordinator. So I'm excited about the project. We're going to talk a little bit more about it at the board meeting, but we can certainly talk about it now. There are a number of training programs that we put into the grant application for instructors. One option is to, reduce that. So, excuse me. So the amount of the project cost comes down.
Yeah.
So there's options here on what to do, and make it a little bit easier for us to handle the project. So that's where we are with it right now. We just have to notify her and the district foundation chair, Charlie Rogers. So.
Excellent. No, I think you did an awesome job. It's really great to see that our project has been approved, and I would agree with you. We need to do the best we can in order to achieve it with what we have. So, yeah, excellent. Thank you. I know it was a lot of work for you.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, Vince.
I appreciate all the help. I had a lot of help, and appreciate that. So I think it's going to be a great project. I'm assuming the board will support it. So, but yeah. So look forward to it.
I agree. Excellent. Thanks so much. And the next project is also a project initiated also by PDG Vince, the raffle. So, Alicia, do we know where we stand now with regard to the donation received? We made any progress?
Yeah, it's not much. We've got 4 people that have donated. We're looking, actually Vince sent me a check from a donor that I need to get to the bank. I've been so hung up in other meetings, but we'll get it there by Thursday.
Okay.
We need more exposure to it, and
That's right.
I think maybe even reworking. Vince and I have talked that we are extending the campaign. The district already has the money set for their goal.
Okay. So we can extend it then.
We can extend it. We even talked about extending it into next year, say maybe an August deadline.
Yes.
But I've been in touch with Jeremiah Coker, who's the district PRPI person, and he is so caught up in so many other things, but he's giving us the best advice that he can, I guess, right now. But I think we need to change up the brochure a little bit, and change the dates and really get it back out there. I put it on the district calendar to come up every week, on a Monday. So people see it, but and I think part of possibly part of the reason for the lack of response was Club Runner.
I think we have a link now. So
Yeah,
maybe,
we do.
we have a link. Maybe we can discuss during the board meeting with Andy, our PRPI, to find out, to which extent,
Yeah.
and he can help us with the social media.
I would encourage everybody on this meeting that has a
Share.
Facebook page to share it. I've shared it both on my personal and my business page. So,
Mm-hmm.
or we can get it out there, but
Yes.
then, you know, let's
Correct.
get it revamped and go.
Yes.
Give it a fresh push.
Agree. So, okay. So we can do that. I fully agree. And it's great that now we have extended it. It gives us more time to advertise a little bit more. And okay, that's perfect. Thank you. So our next club monthly meeting. So I think, you know, it was kind of best practice for the club to basically rest a little bit in July. Beginning of July. So what we would like to suggest is to regroup on July the 23rd, and we will combine our e-club meeting with our quarterly meeting. And so hopefully we are currently trying to find some idea to make something fancy with the support of our PRPI and so we'll figure out something hopefully for July 23rd for you guys.
I would also, Malona, I would also like to suggest, and this is top of my mind right now. Last year we did kind of a meet and greet. Well, I mean, you know, we all met and
That's right.
We might even want to think about doing that again around that meeting time where we can get as many club members to physically meet.
Yeah, I think what we can do, we can check, you know, what would be the preferred option people in terms of availability, and do something. I think it was a great experience.
Oh,
And I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was totally fun.
Especially for you, Alicia, right?
I had no idea what I was walking into. But no, it was all good. But I'm thinking that maybe that would be a cool idea, and you know, mentioning it now during a general club meeting,
That's right.
that we do something, maybe do something like that for our July, you know, or you know, this time of year quarterly meeting.
Some of the year. Yeah, I like the idea. I hope you guys like it too. All right, so I think this is all what we have on the agenda. So it's now open forum. Anything you guys would like to share? Any concerns? No, so far so good.
No.
Wow, so it's kind of
No, I do have a question.
Okay.
So,
Uh-huh.
so you say next meeting, July 23rd, does that mean there's not a meeting on the first Tuesday?
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yeah, because in fact, when we have the quarterly meeting, we have two meetings. We have the club meeting at the beginning of the month and the quarterly meeting. So we would like to combine it, knowing that people used to be free usually, you know, in July. So I hope it's fine with everybody. You guys are fine with this approach?
Yeah, it's just, this is kind of, Malona and I have talked about this. This is kind of it's a combination because historically for the past how many years, the club has not had a meeting in July. We've kind of, because it's the first month of the new year and a lot of people are on vacation but by combining the two in July, we're hoping to give a greater impact to the meeting that we have.
Got it.
You good? You good, Andy?
Yeah, I got it.
All right.
Okay. Excellent. All right, so it sounds like I'm gonna give you 10 minutes back for the day so that you guys can enjoy a cocktail, something like that. So we are going to close the meeting with a 4-way test. Is it the truth?
Is it fair to all
Fair to all
concerned?
concerned. Will it
Will it
build
build
goodwill
goodwill and better
friendship?
friendships? Will it be beneficial
Beneficial
for all
concerned.
concerned?
And is it?
And will it be fun?
Will it be fun? Excellent, good
So
job.
are we meeting back at 8? Do you want to?
Yeah, we can
Or-
take 10-minute break and we
Okay.
meet back at 8, if
Okay,
you
I'm gonna
guys
go
want.
ahead and stop the recording and we'll see y'all back here at 8. I'll keep the
At
meeting.
8.
Okay.
Okay.
to see you, Heather.
perfect.